I started my education at Kent Center School, the public school, which was a K through 8. And I went through 8th grade there. And then because my dad was on the faculty, I was able to go to Kent School. And I had to live on campus. I couldn't live at home. I had to live on campus. That was a real transition at 14. And I went there for 4 years.
So after Kent, where did you go to college?
I applied to 3 schools. I applied to Princeton, Williams, and Vassar was my backup. And I went to Princeton.
So what year did you end up going to law school?
I went to law school in 1976,
And
the fall of 1976. I went to University of Connecticut Law School.
So when was it that you got sworn into the Connecticut bar?
I was sworn in October of 1979.
Well, as you started that adventure, what was the employment market like when you began looking for a job?
I did get a job with Connecticut Legal Services.
What type of work were you doing for legal services?
I was representing mostly spousal abuse and contested custody divorces and some housing.
And so there came a time that you left legal services, and how did you come about getting into private practice?
I think I might have just heard about the law firm and just sent a letter in my resume cold, and I went with Moeller Horton in 81.
How many lawyers did they have in the firm at that time?
I think they had maybe 5.
Were there any other women?
Yes. Naomi Plakins, she was a recent graduate from University of Connecticut.
And was there a particular attorney in the firm that became a mentor or was a mentor to you?
I would say Wes Horton, who continues to be a mentor in many ways to me now, some few years later.
What type of work were you doing?
I became the lawyer handling the Pro Hoc Vici lawyers from New York who were representing Eli Lilly and Company.
How long did that case take of your career?
I became a principal in the firm in 1985, I think. And I would say I started to do that in 83 or 84. It may have been why I became a principal, because of the revenues brought in. For about 4 or 5 years.
How many appellate arguments do you think you handled while you were at the office?
I was certainly handling a half a dozen a year, mostly civil cases and mostly the state appeals court.
And so were your arguments in both the appellate and the Supreme Court?
Yes, although actually I remember them being more in the Supreme Court. The one argument that stands out in my mind is the one, I think it might have been the first one I made in front of the Connecticut Supreme Court. I got up and I started making my argument, and one of the male justices, stopped me and said, Attorney Davis, I have a question. Are those new glasses? And I said, yes, they are new glasses that I'm wearing, yes. And they're very nice. You may continue. So, needless to say, that kind of threw off my momentum. But the most interesting case I think I had was I represented the Trantolas in a case unfortunately involving Joe, who had died, and his brother asked me to argue the case that because they were going to dismiss it because it was moot, because Joe had died and the fine hadn't been paid, but the state was willing to waive it, and I argued that the whole thing should be dismissed, not just the appeal, but his conviction, the infraction. But I know it sounds kind of ridiculous, except that it's still cited. because when defendants die during, while their appeals are pending, that case is cited. And I think, well, I made law not very well, and I did get one justice to go with me on this because I lost otherwise. It was, they dismissed the appeal, but not the underlying conviction.
At some point, you became a Superior Court judge. And when did that happen, and who appointed you?
I was appointed by Governor Lowell Weicker to the trial bench in November of 1993. I was in Waterbury Criminal Court for a year, and then I was in Hartford Housing Court for 2 years, and eventually ended up, when we moved back to Kent, in Litchfield Superior Court, where I was the administrative judge for 5 years.
So you were a trial judge for 10 years.
10 years, yep.
Were there any particular types of decisions that you found challenging?
The challenging decisions were the sentencings, because I did a lot of Part A criminal work in Litchfield. And sentencing I found a particularly challenging. I found it particularly challenging, difficult cases with young people, and balancing all the factors you have to balance under our law to come up with the fair sentence.
And at some point, you were elevated to the appellate court. Can you tell me about that?
At the end of my tenure as the administrative judge of Litchfield, I was thinking about what do I do, and it happened that there were some vacancies in the appellate court, and I was I was approved for elevation, and Governor Rowland elevated me.
When did you become chief judge of the court?
I became chief judge in March of 2010.
And you're the second woman who has held the title, Judge DuPont.
Judge DuPont was the first, and she really set the tone of the court.
Do you feel that gender has made any difference in your ability to carry out your leadership responsibilities as chief judge?
No, I haven't felt that matters. I mean, who I am matters. The fact that I have a certain type of personality that may be related to my gender, but I don't feel like, no, I don't feel that.
What accomplishment in your life are you the most proudest of?
Creating a really good, a really good place to be professionally. I would just say one of my values, or what I think about is, as a leader, which I am as the chief judge, I think about myself as a servant. And I think that's a really important concept when you're trying to make sure everyone is appreciated, and that you're hearing from them, learning from them.